With more and more UFC events these days and the best of the best going up against one another, it's safe to say we've been treated to the very best fights in recent years. But occasionally, those main events are marred by injuries that can come out of the blue. Today, we're discussing 8 main events which have been ruined by unforeseen injuries, so stay right where you are. Let's get straight into them. First up, it's the Korean Zombie. Chan Sung-young was one of the best featherweights in the world back in 2013 and had just put together 3 straight wins before taking on featherweight GOAT Jose Aldo. In the build-up to the big fight, he had beaten Leonardo Garcia via twister, one of only 2 men to do so in the UFC, and also finished 2 of the division's best in the shape of Mark Hominick and current lightweight contender Dustin Poirier. And in the fight against Aldo, in which he held his own for the opening 3 rounds, his dream of featherweight gold would come undone as he dislocated his shoulder after throwing a punch. Officially, the fight was scored as a TKO win for Aldo, but the shoulder dislocation was the real reason for it. The Zombie was visibly shaken by the injury and retreated in an attempt to lodge the shoulder back into place, which only served to invite the Brazilian legend onto him. Of course, TKZ wouldn't be seen for more than 3 years after the fight thanks to his surgery and subsequent military service for Korea. Give us your thoughts on the Zombie below. TJ Dillashaw is up next. Stick around. The most recent addition to today's list comes from UFC 280 this past October. Dillashaw was finished by current champion Aljamain Sterling in the second round. But just like the Zombie, his night would be brought to an abrupt end thanks to a dislocated shoulder. The shoulder actually popped out in the first round, but TJ was able to survive the round, with his coach popping it back in between the first and second rounds. However, the issue would rear its ugly head again shortly after, and Sterling wasn't about to let the opportunity to finish the fight slip through his fingers a second time. He pounced on Dillashaw, who couldn't properly defend himself, and finished the fight with punches. After the world title bout, Dillashaw actually admitted that the injury had initially occurred 5 or 6 weeks before the fight, but given his serious inactivity over the past few years, most of which was his own fault as he got popped for steroid abuse, he decided to keep quiet and take the fight. You guys think Dillashaw should have disclosed the injury? Let us know below. Anderson Silva is coming through now. Stay tuned. Make way for the GOAT, y'all. Anderson is easily one of the top 5 UFC fighters of all time and almost certainly the best middleweight. However, Chris Weidman shocked the world in July 2013 as he dethroned the champ and brought to an end a run of more than 7 years without defeat for the Brazilian. During that time, Silva had put together a winning run of 17 fights, so when Weidman took his crown, he was given an instant rematch. The fight took place in December 2013, but would end with a brutal injury to Silva in the second round. As he attempted a leg kick on the American, Weidman checked, and Silva's lower leg bone shattered in what was one of the most grotesque and now iconic injuries the UFC had ever seen. The injury signaled not just the end of the fight, but it also rubber-stamped the end of the Anderson Silva era, an era of dominance that has not been seen since. Who is your GOAT? Next up, it's Alexander Rakic. The Austrian light heavyweight, Rakic is one of the division's brightest prospects, so when he was thrown in against former champ Jan Blachowicz earlier this year, the fight was seen as a #1 contender bout. Rakic came into the fight with a record of 6-1 in the UFC, only tasting defeat with a split decision loss to Volkan Ozdemir in a fight many people had him down as winning. However, the fight with Jan would abruptly end in the third round as Rakic suffered what at the time appeared to be an innocuous injury. His knee buckled, but it quickly became apparent there was something seriously wrong. It later transpired that Rakic had completely torn his ACL, so he couldn't have carried on had he wanted to. The big man is currently going through rehabilitation, and hopefully he'll make it back into the title picture when he returns to full fitness. Give us your thoughts on this fight below. Conor is joining us now. Stay tuned. MMA's biggest loudmouth, Conor McGregor, took on Dustin Poirier in January 2021, suffering what some suggest was a shock KO loss. Others closer to the sport knew that anything other than a Poirier win would have been more of a shock, however. Given the fact that McGregor had won an earlier 2014 bout between the two, a trilogy fight was quickly ordered as the UFC knew they could cash in on the rivalry. In the very first round, Conor's leg appeared to buckle beneath his own weight, with his leg visibly snapping under his own weight. It is thought the Irishman came into the fight with an injured leg, but Poirier would later say that he heard the leg break as he checked a McGregor kick earlier in the fight. McGregor's coach said it happened as his fighter kicked Dustin's elbow. However it happened, it was surely one of the most gruesome injuries we've seen, and it quickly brought the main event to a close via doctor stoppage. match. We have Tom Aspinall coming through now. England's Aspinall is highly regarded by the UFC brass, and he is widely expected to make a serious run at the UFC heavyweight crown once he returns from injury. The injury we speak of took place during his last fight in London over the summer, as he took on fellow heavyweight contender Curtis Blaydes. Big Tom had come into the fight on a 5-fight tear, finishing everyone and breaking the record for the least amount of octagon time while racking up those wins. But when he came up against Blaydes, the fight wouldn't see 20 seconds. The event was meant to be his big coming out party, but after he threw a kick at Blaydes, his knee would give out as he took a step back. It was clearly evident that something was drastically wrong, and Aspinall's dreams of potentially fighting for the title within the next fight or two quickly dissipated. Of course, this is hopefully just a setback in his fledgling career, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Do you guys see Aspinall as a future heavyweight champ? Let us know below. We're talking Brian Ortega now. Don't go anywhere. Perennial featherweight contender Brian Ortega came up against Yair Rodriguez earlier this year in a fight which was being billed as a #1 contender fight in the division. However, it wouldn't see the second round, as Ortega would suffer a debilitating shoulder injury as he defended an armbar attempt. The fight would signal the second main event fight in which Rodriguez's opponent was forced to retire due to injury, the other being Jeremy Stephens back in 2019 after an eye poke, and the crowd was audibly disappointed as the fight was over before it had even really gotten going. Many people claimed after the fight Rodriguez should have been given more credit for his role in the injury. I mean, if he hadn't gone for the submission attempt, Ortega wouldn't have been forced into defending himself, right? Whatever happened, the fight would signal the Californian's third loss in his past 4 fights. So where do you guys think he goes from here? Let us know below. And finally, Charles Oliveira is coming through. Recent lightweight champion Charles Oliveira came into his 2015 fight against Max Holloway in the midst of his inconsistent era. Of course, we all know what happened from 2018 onwards, as he went on an 11-fight win streak, which would culminate in the lightweight title. However, the fight against Holloway in Saskatoon is one of the strangest stoppages that the main event fight has ever seen, as the Brazilian would go down to the canvas after grabbing his own neck. As he got back up, he placed his hand around his throat, signaling that something was very wrong. The fight would result in a TKO finish for Max, but the esophageal tear was credited to a recurring neck injury by Charles' team. Of course, Oliveira would later get his game together in a big way and become one of the most dangerous fighters in the world. But it would have been interesting to see how this fight played out, as Max was in the midst of a mighty impressive win streak of his own at the time. Who is the best lightweight champion in history, in your opinion? Let us know below. As always, thanks for tuning in today, and remember to stop by again next time for some fun and games. And why not do us a solid by liking and sharing today's video, while also subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on more great content in the future. Bye guys.